didn't like to do that, so he starts looking around, and the issue at that time was a severe food shortage, and so there was very little agricultural production. And Levy asked the question, he always asks questions, and here was his question. If we could separate the dirt from the rocks, do you think we could grow something here? So he's walking around Eleuthera asking that question. And people don't seem very optimistic about that question because they just can't imagine it. Well, he goes to people he knows in the States, and he asks questions, and finally they apparently designed some machinery, just something that they figured out could do that job. They broke the machinery down. They had no way to get it over the island. They had to break it down, put it on boats, bring it to the island, reassemble it, and start dividing the dirt from the rocks and the underbrush and all that kind of stuff. And very quickly they say, yeah, we can do this, and they start growing some crops. Levy says, well, what are we going to do to his wife? And his wife says, well, they need fresh milk. Production of fresh milk in those days was about 50 quarts a day. So he knows some dairy farmers up in Harrisville. You would think, the way this story is going, that Harrisville was the center of the universe in those days. It wasn't, but it seemed like it. So he goes to talk to this guy about getting some cows. And so he says, do you think the cows would be able to survive in this island? Because it's tropical, there's ocean. And there's no ocean up in Harrisville. It's landlocked, there's lakes, but no ocean. So they take them down there, and in fact, they do survive. One of the first problems they have is they're producing a lot of product, but the island doesn't have that many people. They don't need all the product. Who needs the product is Nassau. He says, how are we going to get it there? And he runs into a guy who I believe his name was Paul Clear. Is that right? I'm sorry? Victor. I'm sorry, Victor Clear. And him, if you look at this picture, Levy's on your right, and Victor's in the center. Is that right, Jim? Is that look familiar?
I think so.
Yeah.
But Paul's
So is Paul here?
That was my father.
Is that your father in the middle?
yeah, Paul and Gilbert.
Victor Clear.
Two of his sons.
Oh, wow. Wonderful. I've been just being amazed by the work of your father. Jim gave me the Southern Boating magazine, I think, last time I was here.
But Paul wrote that article.
Oh, fascinating, fascinating. So here they are, and they're contracting to build some special vessels to transport their products over there, which consisted of fresh milk, eggs, chickens, and ice cream. Levy, here's one of the boats that they built, the Samana, is that how you pronounce it? And the other one is the Arawak.
And the passenger.
What's that?
Passenger.
And the passenger.
That was his private yacht, was the passenger.
Was this his private yacht, this one?
No, that was a freight boat.
This was the freight boat. The other one this one was the yacht.
No, that was a freight boat as well. Yeah.
Okay, because I know he built 5 boats for Levy, as far as I remember.
My father built all of those for Mr. Levy.
Oh, nice. Well, here's another picture of somebody getting married from your family. Probably know who that is. Another boat under construction.
1922, my father's overall has nothing to do with that.
Okay. When I found the picture, I thought it looked cool. I said, let's stick that in. One of the other things that Levy did is in Nassau, he built offices and warehousing so that he could bring in his product and distribute it. This building is on the waterfront in Nassau. They've named it the Austin T. Levy Building, apparently in 1961. It now houses the agriculture department for the nation of the Bahamas. Here's another shot of that. Here's the water side. You can see the 2 huge piers behind the building to bring the rather large vessels that he had from Eleuthera. And then the front of the building here are the 3-story offices. These products were distributed through milk stands. This is one of them that still exists. They're not using it for milk. I believe this place is a chicken takeout place. Is it? People know this one? Yeah. We'll be going there after this. And this is another one. This is a bar. I was told this was a bar. I went into it. It looked to me like a liquor store, but I was been corrected by somebody who lives here who said, it's a bar. Okay. Now, apparently he built 10 of these. I have seen 2 and I think a 3rd one today, and somebody else that we were talking to yesterday said, I think I know where there's 2 others. So if anybody knows where they are, I'd love to get pictures of them. I'd like to track them down, and so I can document all of those buildings. We're going to come down with a film crew later on this year and take some film and stuff of these various buildings and stuff. So if you know one, I'd love to hear about it. He also built a home. The original reason that they actually came to Nassau was not for a honeymoon. They came to Nassau because, besides her family owning a house, June Rockwell said, this is the only way I'm going to get my husband to relax. I've got to get him out of Rhode Island. I've got to get him away from the mills. I've got to get him away from that sales office in New York. I've got to get him away from traveling back and forth all the time. I'll take him to Nassau and he'll be able to relax. Ha. So they built a little shack on the beach. It's the one on the right. It's called Ship Ahoy. This was their home. They started out with a fairly small home. They kept adding to it. They finally ran out of lumber. And the building is huge. I think Paul was telling me the other night that they've given this house to the U.S. Marines. Is that correct? And this is where they hang out. Not bad digs, better than a barracks, you know, in a base someplace. One of the cool things that happened is that Levy met the Duke of Windsor. The Duke of Windsor came to the island, as you know, shortly after abdicating the throne, throne for the King of England. Was sent here by his brother to be the governor of the Bahamas. And his wife didn't like it here. Said it was too darn hot. And now half of the economy, maybe 90% of the economy here is because it's too darn hot. Isn't that interesting? But one day he came up to Harrisville. I don't know how he found it, but he got there. Because he wanted to know how Levy had been able to do so much in a short lifetime. He wanted to see for himself what these mills looked like, what the business was about. So he comes up in 1944. Remember, this is wartime. He comes up in 1944. Well, let me tell you, the women were thrilled. He did not have his wife with him. He was walking around, looking good. Women were chasing him, screaming, and all this kind of thing. This was very much documented in the local press in Rhode Island. They just thought it was the greatest thing. When the war began, Levy started a magazine to send out to the troops. It was called the Stillwater News. And it was a little magazine. This is the size of it. It came out once a month, 40 pages, had pictures, had gossip, had who's getting married, who got all the local news, right? It also had news from the troops out on the front, from France, from all over the world. Also had news about who had arrived at their base in England or wherever they were going. And then it also talked about things that were happening with the business that were positive. And they were always very appreciative of the troops. They always kept an honor roll for each of the factories. And each factory had their own report in this magazine. They had 60 people who volunteered to write this magazine every month. So there were at least 4 people from every factory or every plant that they had. So it was a complete record of everything that was going on. It's fascinating. It's like reading your diary. You know, if a factory had a diary, this is their diary. And he kept it going long after the war ended. In Rhode Island, they thought it was funny, so they said they made up a song based on Yankee Doodle about the Duke of Windsor. And I'll just tell you the first thing. It says, the Duke of Windsor rode through town in Mr. Levy's Packard, and all the people flocked around, but not to see Jack Stratford, who I have no idea who it is. And so it goes on. But they made fun of him in a way, but at the same time were having fun with him. And everybody really loved what he was doing. And loved the fact that he came there. The Duke of Windsor got into a little sort of a scuffle with Mr. Levy during the war, because as the war began in early 1942, Levy raised all the wages of everybody that worked for him on Eleuthera and in Nassau as well. Because he owned stores over in Eleuthera, all the stores where you bought your different supplies besides the eggs and so on. And then he had the staff that worked at the stores, he had the staff that worked in the distribution and the offices. The name of the company was the Harrisville Company down here, as you probably know. And so he raised their wages without asking anybody. Well, apparently that was not the thing you did in those days if you were in a different country. So the Duke of Windsor got a hold of him and said, why'd you raise the wages without checking with us? He said, well, I figured by the time you guys got through all the paperwork and stuff, the war'd be over. And I knew everything was going to go up in price, and it did. And I didn't want my people to have to live in a lesser style of life while they were helping to fight the war through their work and so on. And the Duke of Windsor said, you know, you're right. And they kind of laughed together and thought that was funny. sad news is that in 1951, Austin Levy passes away. It's a rainy day. He passes away in a hospital in Providence called, I'm trying to remember the name of it actually, Jane something. And he's 70 years old. The year before, he ran for U.S. Senator against the governor of the state of Rhode Island. And he was beaten badly in votes, but he won majority of the towns in the state, but he didn't get the big metropolitan areas because he wasn't really known there. He was known in the country. He was a country guy. So he lost that race, and I think that's one of the things that kind of led to his, getting ill soon after that, because within a year of that race, he was dead. He died of a heart attack, but he his health just went down. He went to the hospital for a checkup and stayed for 6 weeks. Things like that, and little by little it got worse, and one day he never came out. What are the effects, or what are the lasting effects of somebody like Levy? I put a few down here for you. One of them, a nice one for the students in our town, in the town of Burrowville, is that they award two $7,500 scholarships that are good for 4 years. And they award 2 a year, and they've been doing this for quite a while. So that student will get $7,500 each year for the 4 years of their college. So we do 2 of those every year. Another thing that they do is that his Stradivarius violin was donated to the Boston Symphony Orchestra, first violin for the orchestra. And the Assembly Theater is still operating. That's another thing that came out of this long giving, this social consciousness that he had about life and working together and so on. And it not only shows movies, but it shows community events and so on. In the library, a newer library, which was not built by Levy, but the old library ran out of space and they turned that into the annex for the town hall. They put this mural up, which is the life of June and Austin Levy, telling some of the things that they did. Among other things that weren't mentioned in this little talk is that they actually built a bridge between 2 communities that was having a huge problem getting, the traffic problems couldn't be resolved, so he said, just stop, we'll tear out these roads and put a bridge right in the center of the thing, and that solved all the traffic problems, and people didn't realize how bad they actually had it before. But he did things like that were just out of the goodness of his heart. He paid for these things that didn't go through the town budget or any of that kind of stuff. He said, let's just do it. Levy's saying was that, and this is on his tombstone, which is on a spot overlooking that Harrisville Pond, it says he loved life and his fellow man and gave his best to both. And that's what we remember him about, and that's sort of his lasting legacy. During his lifetime, not surprisingly, he didn't want anything named after him. Nothing during his lifetime was ever named after him. When he passed away, the village people in Harrisville begged his widow to let them name the new elementary school after him, and so now there is a Austin T. Levy School in the community of Harrisville. Some years later, Mrs. Levy donated the money for a nice indoor ice hockey rink. You probably have very little ice hockey down here. Do you have any? No. We have lots up there. That's almost like the national pastime up there, because they all started playing hockey on the ice of the pond. When the ponds froze in the winter, when they froze in the winter, they would be playing ice hockey. She wanted to see them be able to do that year-round, so she built this beautiful ice hockey rink. It's unbelievable. It's gigantic. And that's called the June Rockwell Levy Ice Skating Rink, and that's also in the town of Harrisville. I don't know if you have any questions. There's plenty more. I'm giving you sort of the Reader's Digest. Yes, sir.
Did he marry twice?
I'm sorry?
Did he marry twice?
Not that I'm aware of. I only know that he...
All right, well, I don't know. I thought it was his wife, but it might be his daughter. In Eleuthera now, there's the Levy Preserve, which is run by the National Trust.
Yeah, that's not the same Levy. That's not the same Levy at all. No, I know it's... Yeah, I had that confusion myself as I started working on this. And here's what's interesting. May not be interesting to you, but it's surprised me that a year and a half ago, I'd never heard of Austin Levy. I came across him in some work that I was doing. I'm a writer, so some other work I was doing. When I looked up to see where the June Rockwell Levy Foundation came from, I asked one question. I said, where'd the money come from? And the people I was talking to had no idea. So when I looked it up on realized here's this guy, Austin T. Levy, and then read a book by Louis Bleiweiss, who was a friend of his who worked at the Woonsocket Call, which was a daily newspaper in the city of Woonsocket in northern Rhode Island. And he wrote a book about his life, and it was commissioned by his widow, June Rockwell Levy. And kind of it's a great book, a lot of stories and stuff about his life. And then I realized that there was more to it than I even realized. And I've, of course, been finding out all kinds of other things since then, traveling all over the place trying to find them out.
And the Levy Foundation gives us $1,000.
Yeah, the June Rockwell Levy Foundation is actually set up during the Depression, and the money from that foundation given to the foundation by the Levys themselves was the money that was used to build all the community buildings in the town, and is still a much functioning foundation that gives away hundreds of thousands of dollars every year in Rhode Island and a few other places like the Bahamas Historical Society and other close friends, I suppose. Very nice people and run by people that are really dedicated to keeping alive the legacy of the Levy family and the legacy of the things they've done for the community.